You're probably getting ready for vacation this summer. And you're probably thinking, it'll be so great to go to a different country, experience different food, do different things. But I'm really not looking forward to the roaming charges on my phone when I get back. That is why we want you to try Saily. It's an eSIM, and unlike other eSIMs, it's backed by Nord Security, which means that wherever you are in the world, not only is Saily basically available, 160 countries, 8 regions around the world, but also you're backed by Nord Security. I'm re-emphasizing that, which means that your information should be pretty safe. It's Nord Security. That's what they're known for. And the great thing about Saily is wherever you're going, you're going to be able to buy an eSIM plan. You can go country to country to country, buy them for as long as you need them, move on. It's awesome. And also, if you're ever using sketchy Wi-Fi, one more time, we're backed by Nord Security. So you're not really so worried about it. Now, we want you to try this so bad, we're going to give you a little discount. Agent P is the discount at Saily.com. So go to Saily.com/AgentP or go to the App Store, Google Play Store, wherever it is you get your apps, and it should work with everybody. Download the Saily app, Saily, and use the code AgentP at checkout because you're going to get a nice little discount and a few extra months for free. Check it out. You're going to love it. Saily, Saily. That should be your new eSIM go-to. Good luck.
This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
Welcome to the Stanley Cup Final edition of Agent Provocateur. Here is my great friend and co-host Adam Wylde. Adam, how are you?
Oh, Allan, I'm good. I'm enjoying the Stanley Cup Final. I'm ready for, as of this recording, we're going to get Game 4 tonight. And I have to ask, the way that the Stanley Cup has ended up, we get a rematch, we get two teams that are obscenely close. Is this one of the better back-to-back matchups that you can remember? And I'm thinking specifically about the Penguins-Red Wings that we saw. I'm trying to think of who else went head-to-head. It hasn't been many, right? We've been, very, very fortunate on this one. I mean, you would remember the Oilers and Islanders 83-84.
Sure.
In terms of back-to-back Stanley Cup rankings that you can remember, how does this rank?
I always like to look at it as what can you learn? Because we're always learning. You can never learn too much. You can never know too much. So going back to Edmonton and the Islanders, there were several legendary Oiler players who made comments after losing to the Islanders and walking by the dressing room, heartbroken, while the Islanders in their room were celebrating with the cup and looking in, and they were all the Oilers, dressed in their suits, all looking good. And they look into the Islanders room, and these guys are bloodied. They've got ice packs everywhere, black eyes. And Gretzky himself made a couple of comments saying, we looked into their dressing room and thought, oh, that's the way we're supposed to look.
Right.
So It was the losing that taught them how to play to win. Yeah. And many times players and teams don't learn how to win until they lose, sometimes in spectacular fashion. So then fast forward to 2 years that I was intimately involved in, the back-to-back 2008 Red Wings Penguins Stanley Cup Finals. Red Wings win the cup. Very young Pittsburgh team, Flower, Sid, Letang, very young team, and now go forward 1 year to 2009. And the Penguins were down in the series 3-2, cup in the building, in Mellon Arena, Game 6, Penguins win, tied the series up. Now going back to Joe Louis, Game 7, the dramatic 1-game, one-and-done showdown, and the Penguins won the cup in dramatic fashion. Flower made the big save in the last seconds against Nick Lidstrom, and it was, and I've talked to a lot of those players on that Penguins team, and I represented many of them. On that Penguins team, Flower, Pascal Dupuis, Ruslan Fedotenko, Peter Sikora, Miroslav Shatan on the 09 team that won the Cup. And many of the players that were part of that team in 08 and other guys that I didn't represent that I had spoken to at the time, losing to Detroit in 08 taught them how to win. So I was looking for that now in this series. So far, haven't seen it. But I was looking to see if the players in Edmonton are coming in a year after losing to Florida, and if they had learned and acquired certain insights and understandings that are unspoken about how to win. And look, the series is still young. Edmonton hasn't looked great so far. Or you can say Florida looks like a powerhouse, whichever way you want to, cup half full or half empty. Game 4 tonight will be a pivotal game in the series. And let's see how it goes. But the hockey has been amazing. It's been great hockey, right? Every game even last game was still a great game until it got away. But it's been great hockey.
Well, I want to ask you about this because it's been something that everybody who's seen or faced the Florida Panthers. So now it's Lightning fans, it's Leaf fans, it's Canes fans, and now Oilers fans. But anybody that sees Florida in the playoffs, anybody that used to see the Boston Bruins of the 2010s in the playoffs, there was a way of winning where it's sometimes what you can get away with. And the Florida Panthers more than anybody, and I think the Oilers, even though they went down 6-1 or whatever in the last game, they tried to take their pound of flesh before the game was over. The Florida Panthers are able to get away with things perceptually that other teams just cannot. Little things behind the whistle. And I'm just wondering, Allan, are they a team that stands out to you as any different from any other bullying team from any other era? I'm talking about the 70s Flyers. The early 80s Islanders were really tough. The Oilers were we talk about Gretzky, but let's talk about Glenn Anderson, Mark Messier, Esa Tikkanen, some of those guys.
Marty McSorley, Dave Semenko.
Yes. So are the Panthers different, or are they just the new version of all of these teams that we've sort of seen before?
Well, I think that hockey has evolved dramatically over each decade, and the games themselves are there is no team in the NHL like the Broad Street Bullies of the Philadelphia Flyers in the mid 70s. I mean, they beat the shit out of the entire NHL for 2 years, scared, intimidated every other team and winning 2 cups in a row. And it wasn't until Montreal with Dryden back in the net after his 1-year sabbatical and getting true to form and having a team based on speed, but also there was some real toughness there. I mean, Larry Robinson, body check into the boards, the Montreal Forum of Gary Dornhofer. The boards moved. It may go down as the most crushing body check, momentum changing body check of any hockey. The players and the officials and everybody stood around the board scratching their heads. The boards had moved 6 inches from the body check at the old Forum.
Wow.
Right now, I think Florida is a fantastic mix of speed, skill, and physicality. The chemical equation that puts this team together, they're a formidable opponent. And it's rare that the 2 best teams end up in the Stanley Cup Finals facing each other. But I would argue that Edmonton and Florida are the two best teams in the NHL right now. And the fact that they both made it to the finals and are playing against each other head to head, this is what it's all about.
Dennis Maruk, who scored 60 goals in the 81-82 year with the Capitals, he came in on the podcast years ago when Ken Reed and Dennis wrote a book together. And I asked him about the Philadelphia flu, as in, when the Flyers came into town or when you went into Philadelphia. I'm sick. I said, was that a real thing? And he said it was a real thing. There were guys, because I think he was playing with like the Kansas City Scouts or something like that. Cleveland Barons, Kansas City Scouts, one of those forgotten weird NHL teams in the 70s. And he said, guys would quite literally, I don't want to do this. I don't want to play these guys. That's how crazy it was. Now, the Florida Panthers are probably not a fun team to match up against, but you don't see anybody go, I'm too sick to play them. Right? It's kind of crazy. And so, with the NHL in such a good place product-wise, Allan, right? The changes that have been made over the last few decades, I'd say, going back to a couple lockouts ago when the red line, disappeared, the two-line pass thing went away, the icings have been cleaned up. The product is spectacular. The question with fans has been these last two Stanley Cup Finals, the spreading out of the finals seems to be a bit of a ratings momentum killer. And what I mean by that is people are comparing the NHL Stanley Cup Finals to I believe it's what they call the Women's Baseball World Cup, which is an event that draws similar numbers. And for the NHL, that isn't good enough. It's not that there's anything wrong with the World Baseball, World Cup of baseball for, the women's game, but the NHL claims to aspire to more and wants to be one of the big four leagues. And so to maintain that position, if that's even a true statement, you got to pull more than more than 2.1 million people or whatever. And so I know the travel's really tough, particularly from Edmonton to Florida, where even if you charter a plane, you got to stop and somewhere and refill it. And then you got to, it's a 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. sort of travel day. It's crazy. Why is it so spread out? And is there anything that can be done to prevent that?
Yeah. So there's no doubt that having 2 days off between each game is a momentum killer. And it's TV driven, right?
Yes.
The networks are desperately trying to avoid the NBA. They have surrendered the oxygen and the space to the NBA, and they don't want to have any head-to-head matchups at all in any way. And that crossover limits the flexibility in setting the schedule. But you've got great hockey. You've got, while Edmonton and Florida are not big markets, they're great teams with great players on both sides. The draw, the TV ratings should be more than they are. And every Stanley Cup playoffs and especially the finals, you see the NHL pumping out press release after press release. It's the greatest, biggest rating ever since 1998 on a Wednesday night after on and with all these qualifiers. But the reality is the ratings are a huge disappointment. And people default and say, well, there's no New York, there's no LA, there's no Chicago, there's no Boston. And that's the reason why ratings are down. And they are partially correct.
Okay.
But if it's the product that we're selling and you have such compelling hockey and a compelling playoff, I mean, let's just go back a month. The first round was dynamite. The first round was incredible hockey, right? Across the board. across the board. It was unreal. For hockey fans and and I know a lot of people who started watching a series who were not hockey fans this year, but had come on board because the Four Nations intrigued them, right? They're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And they're following it and they're watching now. And they started watching early in a series and they're texting me. Like, this is cool. I didn't know it was this cool. They're enjoying all this, but there was great momentum. There was hockey every single night, different series every single night. And now it feels like there's a game and then there's literally nothing going on for 3 days.
Yes. And that's coming off of a somewhat weak Eastern Conference final. The West was pretty good. West was a very competitive series. The East was not even close.
Yeah.
Right?
And look, players are tired and you get to the end, you're banged up, but you're also working off of adrenaline. Even with the travel between, Florida and Edmonton, which ain't ideal. It's not great. Having a travel day and then a game right after could work and should work.
Well, and so one of the things that I have thought that could fix this problem, right? And by the way, the NBA does not exactly have a big market finals. We're talking about Oklahoma City and Indianapolis. Those are not big money markets. That's not Miami. That's not New York. That's not LA. Those are two mid to small market teams, NBA standard, right?
Yep.
And yet they have one thing that the NHL seems to be slightly leaning into that we have not done enough of as a game is that they have stars. They have legitimate stars that they have promoted and marketed and talked about and made stories about, and people outside of their markets love those guys because X, Y, and Z. I know all of Canada is cheering for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Also, all of Canada loves Pascal Siakam. So there's a draw there. There's the emergence of Tyrese Halliburton. There is so much in there for an NBA fan who's not a fan of either of those teams to still watch. And I would argue the personalities within the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers are some of the best we've ever seen, right? Connor McDavid, best player in the world. Absolute German wunderkind, Leon Draisaitl. There's never been a better player from his country ever, right? Matthew Tkachuk is Hollywood. Like electric personality in terms of what he does in front of the camera. I know he's injured and he's been playing injured since the Four Nations. Brad Marchand, we all know Brad, and he's a fun guy and he's amazing in front of the media, and him and Biz chirping each other on TNT and all that. Like, there are so many personalities here that you can build this off of. I'm surprised that the numbers are what they are, to be honest, Allan. The other thing I wanted to say was, if you start the season a week early, you don't need to worry about the NBA Finals anymore.
Right.
And we believe the season will start right before Canadian Thanksgiving again. They used to start it after Canadian Thanksgiving, which was insane. And you saw last year, Allan, the cup was awarded and 48 hours later we had the draft. It was crazy.
Crazy. And that's so unfair to the players. The players couldn't even properly celebrate the cup. I mean, you're literally there were people on the Florida Panthers management who had to skip the Stanley Cup parade to fly to Vegas for the draft.
Which is crazy.
Crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And so if you started in the last week of September, midway through, the Wednesday of the last week of September, that gets you a week and a half early. The NBA doesn't start till November, but they play a lot more games per week than the NHL does, right? And then the NBA is playing games into June, and the NHL isn't. And it gives people a bit of a breather to figure out, hey, we got a cup winner. It's in the first week of June. We get their cup winner. And in an Olympic years, maybe it's the second week of June, right? Because you're going to have to spread the schedule a little bit. And then you're done. And then you got a couple weeks, and then we get draft free agency. And in fact, if you wanted to, you might even be able to move those up to somewhere a little bit earlier, not Canada Day. Not that I have a problem with it. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. The fact that we get to do this for a living is great. But my point is, if you compress this a little bit, kept the momentum going, and you finished before the NBA did, then you're not worried about scheduling around them. Does that make any sense?
Well, I've been shouting all of this from the rooftops for many, many years right now. The Stanley Cup should never be awarded after June 7, right? And I know a lot of people who are very, stakeholders who are very passionate about wanting the Stanley Cup awarded by the end of May. And there's something else coming. They are expanding the NHL regular season to 84 games, right? That's a done deal. It's happening. So we're going to have 2 more regular season games. It makes it even harder to compress the schedule, especially in a future World Cup and coming up next year, an Olympic year,
Yes.
right? So the solution is starting camp a little bit earlier in September and shorten. Everybody hates training camp. There was no reason.
3 weeks long.
No, and nobody needs to be playing, 6 or 7 or 8 preseason games.
Yes.
Total waste of time.
Mhm.
Right? And I was talking to some GMs and team presidents in the last couple of weeks about this issue in my travels to see games in the playoffs and over to Stockholm for the World Championships. And one GM said to me, he's like, why do we have to invite 60 guys to training camp and have 6, 7 PTOs? Like, we're going to just have to do a better job at getting to our team before camp. And guys all come into camp ready to go. We need a 1-week training camp and boom, off. Let's get the season going.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people who agree with that. And also, why is it set in stone? You talked about July 1 free agency maybe being earlier on the hockey calendar. Why is it so set in stone July 1? Why not be a little bit later? So let's get through July 1 Canada Day. Let's get through 4th of July weekend. And why doesn't free agency start on July 10th?
Well, maybe because they don't want everybody working through July 4th, because that's what would happen, right? You would be working through July 4th.
I've been working through July 4th, every July 4th for 30 years. We're not done. We're not done.
You're right. You're right.
Remember the year the Kovalchuk contract held up the free agent market?
Oh, yeah.
We were July 5th and 6th. There was still, 140, 150 free agents.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So why not just throw the entire free agency calendar forward to July 10 and compress the arbitration schedule, and we can still be done by the beginning of August and still have plenty of time for we don't have much summers anyways. I understand, but the GMs and the teams support that. There wouldn't be any pushback from them. It's going from the draft. The reason why we decentralized the draft for this year, which is going to be a one and done, because I've already heard next year's draft is going to be back to everybody under one roof. This sucks, right? And everybody is walking around saying this sucks. No one is happy about it. Gary knows how unhappy people are about it. It wasn't his decision. The GMs voted 28-4 in favor of decentralizing. I bet if they took another vote right now, it would be the same number in the opposite direction.
Got it. Okay. Well, here's what I would ask then, just as an aside, and we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. I don't want every general manager on stage announcing the draft pick and bringing 40,000 people with them and making jokes about the city or whatever. It's not yucks. Like, can we just move? The first round doesn't need to be 4 hours long, is my point. But we can talk about that at another date. I guess my thing here, Allan, is there's so many easy ways. It used to be that guys showed up to training camp, and some still do, but most do not, where they didn't do anything all summer, and they're smoking cigarettes.
That doesn't it? Yeah, in the past, yes, that doesn't exist anymore.
these guys like take 2 weeks off and they're already back to training.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I bet Max Pacioretty is working out, whether he's coming back or not. I bet he's working out. I remember the interview.
Max is coming back.
Right?
Okay. He is playing next year. He's decided to play next year, and you're correct. He is training very hard already for next year.
Not shocked, right?
Yeah.
And I bring his name up because we had him on the show, and he is like by reputation an animal when it comes to health and fitness and that sort of thing, right? I mean, you saw how it benefited him in the playoffs. My point is, a coach doesn't need 3 weeks to figure out whether a guy's going back to junior or to the A or the N. We know that, right? We just know where it's going to go. A week and a half, 10 days training camp, it's probably all you need.
Yes.
And so if you move this schedule, you compress things a little bit, I think you would just find a far more harmonious thing. And I think what's interesting about this is there seems to be a lot of stuff that's waiting to change when Gary goes. There's a lot of stuff that's very obvious that I think everybody wants, but I think the commissioner doesn't want, and therefore it's not happening. And so if he's truly retiring in the next year or two, I feel like even with the new CBA, the new Rogers TV deal, the new whatever else that he's put together, the 84 games, there's going to be another gargantuan shift in how the NHL is done and what months it happens in as soon as he goes, because he seems to be the guy holding a lot of that stuff up. Am I incorrect in that? Because there's an appetite. If the owners want it, right?
Here's the issue. Is there really going to be that momentous change with Gary entering retirement? Because I don't think Gary's going away. I think that I think that after he retires, I could see him taking on a position like commissioner emeritus, or remaining in some very fancy titled position where he's retired, but he's still around. And the most likely scenario that I see is Bill Daly stepping into the commissioner role, with Gary stepping back into an advisory semi-retired role. And given that scenario, how much is really going to change?
Nothing. Nothing. Okay, fair enough. By the way, if Steve hears this, he's going to drive off the road. I just want to know. So now
maybe you should text him a heads up before this hits.
Yeah, hey Steve, don't listen to minute 25 of AP. We're a little bit early on this, February 3rd, 2026 specifically, but we thought, we know the guy. We should talk about Julian McKenzie's new book. It's called Black Aces, and it is in bookstores and actually available for pre-sale right now. Indigo, Amazon, and indie bookstores. You can buy it on February 3rd, 2026, or you can pre-order it right now. The game of hockey has been considered a predominantly white sport for nearly every facet of its being, and the length of time it's happened. We know this, but there are some notable, incredible Black stories that Julian is going to tell you. And obviously, we're talking to people like Jerome McGinley, Grant Fuhr, Sarah Nurse, PK Subban, Georges Laraque, Anson Carter, Blake Bolden, and more. An essential collection of stories from notable Black hockey players, personalities, and people. Black Aces in stores February 3rd, 2026, but you can pre-order it wherever you get your books right now. Hey, so Allan, along those lines, we, with two sides who are at war, not even at war, two sides that don't get along, don't agree. And in this case, it's you and Gary. We might have found something that you guys somewhat agree on.
Don't say it.
I gotta say it. Maybe. Now, there was a very viral back and forth between friend of the show, Paul Bissonnette, who was on last year. Great episode, talking about the Babcock stuff. And then there was, and it was during a panel. Gretzky's right there. Gary's sitting at the end of the table. And Paul Bissonnette has been saying, because he's a Leaf fan, God bless him, he's been saying, hey, this tax situation is real. This tax situation is real. And is there going to be anything in the CBA to account for that? Now, Gary and Bill said before the Stanley Cup Finals in their media avail that they didn't see it as an issue. But Gary went right at Paul and said, that's poor journalism, actually. And you have nothing to back that up, and it's not an issue. Allan, you have said that in a different way that you can get around it. You have never said that it's not an issue, because going to New York, going to Canada, going to California, there are ways that you can do this, but they are complex and they require a little bit of financial finagling based on the local laws. Is Gary correct in saying that the tax issue, state to state, province to province, country to country, is a non-issue?
Well, first of all, let me say this. There's actually many, many issues that Gary and I do agree on. But there's a couple of very significant issues that we have not agreed on. For me, it all starts with acknowledging the association between repetitive head impacts, blows to the head, and CTE. And as I have said many times on this show, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but I will say, just to put it all concisely together here, there is carnage out there amongst the retired players community. And we've had Glenn Healy on our show twice to talk in depth about the issues of retired players and health insurance, retired players and the ability for them to live their lives after hockey without injured, damaged, bruised brains. So I'm going to leave that there. Getting back to your question, I did see that segment, and I kind of chuckled to myself when Gary said players do not consider tax issues when making decisions on free agency. And he said it because I'm addressing the players here on the panel who played in the NHL, and it was everyone there, right? Anson Carter, Biz, Lundqvist, and Gretzky. All four of them played in the NHL. And I did make a point in saying all four of them were locked out by Gary at one point in time during their careers for between a half a season and a full season. But we won't get into that, right? But I wanted just one of the people there to say at that time, hey, Gary, you're damn right I thought about the tax issue, state tax issue, when I made my decision on where I was going to play. Now, Gary is correct. There are many other factors, the going to a team that's a contender, who's the coach, the city fitting in with their family, being a good fit. I mean, there's a whole host of factors, and you can argue with every individual player where the tax issue fits in their ranking of criteria in deciding when they have a choice on where they want to play. Now, you've seen Anaheim aggressively use deferred salary, right? Which serves two purposes. Number one, lowering the AAV, lowering the cap number, which benefits the team. And by deferring salary, that's a tax play.
Yep.
That's strictly a tax play. You're not going to defer in a no state tax jurisdiction. You're only going to defer when you're in a California or a New York or somewhere else with a very high state income tax rate. Otherwise, it really makes no sense. Right? What I've always said, and what I've said previously, and we did a whole episode on this once, and we had Sean Packard on, who is Octagon's resident tax guru, is there hasn't been historically enough education, because typically it has been a U.S. versus Canada issue with the impression that you go play in Canada, you're going to get killed on taxes automatically. And there is a tax vehicle called an RCA, Retirement Compensation Agreement, that can bring a player's effective tax rate over his time in Canada to around where it would be playing in a no state tax jurisdiction. Now, the media was not informed enough about it to report it accurately at certain times historically. Players were not educated enough on it, and even teams were not educated enough. If I were a GM of a Canadian hockey team, I would have a tax expert, right, at the ready with tax projections, with the whole RCA laid out on every free agent signing, and that would go along to the agent and the player with every offer.
Right.
Right? I mean, the team should be more aggressive in promoting RCAs. So there are agents and agencies, myself included, that got educated on RCAs when they first started going into practice. And it is a way to alleviate the differences in tax a player will pay over his career in Canada. Now, the money, there are some negatives about it. It's, you play in Florida, you're getting your money right away, and there's a time value to money. You're using an RCA, that money is deposited into this tax vehicle, and you cannot take that money out until you collapse the RCA. Doesn't have to stay in force until 62. You can collapse the RCA whenever you break all your ties to Canada. Okay, so if you're an American player or born player, if you're a European player, and 38% of the NHL is European, yep. You can, when you go back to Sweden or Czech Republic or anywhere else, Germany, Switzerland, Finland, you can, when you leave to go back, and you no longer play for Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and so forth, you can then, you've broken your ties to Canada, you can collapse the RCA, and you can go about paying the 25% flat tax and getting your money out of this vehicle. It's so much of a neutralizer on this issue that the NBA banned it. It is actually in the NBA CBA that the Toronto Raptors are not allowed to offer or work with players. Players in Toronto cannot do RCAs.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Because it would give Toronto a competitive advantage over other NBA teams.
But the problem, I think you hit on at the beginning, is guys see numbers on the page and go, I don't want to do all that shit. I don't want to do all that shit. I don't want to have to get on a phone call with an accountant. I want my money now. So should the Canadian teams do a better job? Should the NHL and NHLPA come up with a solution here themselves? What do you think is the right move here? Ultimately, I'm asking, do you agree with Gary?
Well, I can say this. Gary said that it's not an issue. And he mocked Biz, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. It's not an issue. And I think that any credible agent in the business today has to have a table prepared. I know I do it, of every single NHL team with the tax rate, federal and state, and Canada, provincial and federal, and you can compare directly apples to apples. And any free agent that I represent has got that information in his hands. It's something they want, they look at, and they refer to. And anybody who says they don't do that, they're wrong, because trust me, I know, I'm involved in it, and they do.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm curious about, obviously we know the CBA is being worked on. I know there's very little that can be shared, but that's encouraging, especially as somebody who runs a business that sort of relies on hockey. So it'd be nice to not have a lockout. I want to know, I guess, right now, from an agent's perspective, you're watching the Stanley Cup Final. We're midway through. It's going to wind down here in the next week, where it's going to be over. And you're dealing with a couple of things right now, Allan. You're talking about clients. I was talking to my mom about you actually yesterday. I said he's got the coolest client names in the world. Previous years, Marcel. But this year, Mons Goose. I'm very excited to
Yvonne
as well, of course. But you've got some players that are getting ready for the draft, some players that are getting ready for free agency. What's your day-to-day look like in mid-June? Because it's kind of that weird, it's like almost between Christmas and New Year's, and you don't know what day of the week it is. What's it like for you right now?
So you got a lot of things, as you said, going on. I spent a week in Stockholm at the World Championships, which was great.
I know you enjoyed that a lot.
I enjoyed that a lot, but there were also a significant number of NHL GMs involved in the different teams that are there. And we're all together, right? We're in the same hotels. We're eating breakfast. We're having lunch. We're having dinner. We're going to games together. We're walking through town together. There was a great opportunity to, talk about the draft, talk about players on their team whose contracts are expiring, and make headway on restricted free agents and pending unrestricted free agents. And then I came back to LA and very quickly flew to Buffalo and just spent a week in Buffalo at the NHL Central Scouting Combines, where by my count, 28 GMs were there. Again, all staying within either the Marriott Harborfront connected to the rink or the Courtyard Marriott directly across the street. And, every day was spent walking back and forth between the Marriott and the Courtyard, meeting with different NHL teams. Probably met with, I met with every GM there, but had, some formal meetings where it was the GM, assistant GM, sometimes several assistant GMs all together, and just moving a lot of files along and laying the groundwork for the off season. I was focusing more on restricted free agents with their current teams and trying to get those deals advanced. And those are the ones that are more easily advanceable in many circumstances, while at the same time, I had numerous clients at the combines. So you're client managing, so to speak, and building rapport with the guys there and helping them out with anything they may need. At the same time, have a number of clients close by, and you're able to see them. Now I'm back in LA. Contrary to popular notion, I wish I could turn the camera around. The streets are beautiful. The sky is blue. The sun is out, and any protesting going on. This is a sprawling city of millions of people with, tens of communities. The protesting is limited to about 3 or 4 city blocks. Yeah. Unfortunately, the area is adjacent and sometimes including the area of the Peacock Theater and LA Live downtown. Yep. And with a curfew going on right now in LA, downtown LA only, of 8 p.m., I think everybody's got to keep their eye on that situation and the draft. I mean, if the draft were tonight, with a curfew in effect for downtown, 8 p.m., I don't know how you could have the draft at the Peacock Theater.
Would you do it at the Old Forum?
Well, there's lots of other venues in LA, but now you're coming into is the venue booked already?
Right.
And it's LA, and there aren't many venues in LA that are dark, right? Yeah. On a weekend in July or June, right? Yeah. It doesn't exist.
This concert season.
Yeah. Right. So it's going to be interesting, and we're all hopeful that everything calms down in this 3-4 block radius and we don't have any issues. But so that's basically my days right now. I'm living East Coast hours more than ever. So 5:30 a.m. the calls start. I hit up a lot of GMs as they're driving into work. And I'm on the phone most of the day.
Wow. It's it is actually a wonder that you're able to get to sneak this show in sometimes, especially this time of year. I always kind of there are parts of the year where, just full disclosure, I bug Allan. Hey, Allan, I don't understand this or whatever. And then there's other parts of the year I'm like, I'm not going to bother him. And Allan's always really good about this. And he goes, you can bother me anytime you want. I just might not be able to get back to you. So, I think this is one of those, this is kind of a ramp up season for you, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's a fun time of year. It's a stressful time of year. But I wouldn't have it any other way. That is not a complaint.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because every single day I get to work in this job, even on the worst possible days. I feel blessed to be that little boy growing up in Chamonix, Laval, who has lived out his dream of being involved in the NHL. So every day is a blessing, and I feel blessed every day.
Well, I feel that way too, and I'm just adjacent to it. I'm not in it. It's a pretty sweet gig to be able to do this. And Allan, it's always great to see you. So we'll catch up in the next week or two. We're always really flexible this time of year, so everybody be looking out for our announcements on when the next show is going to be. But we're almost wrapped on. You're a few episodes away here from wrapping on season 4. How about that already?
Yeah, season 4 or season 5.
I think it's 4. I thought it was 3 at the beginning of the year, and you're like, it's 4. It's 4. I think it was 2021 we started. So anyway, Allan, thank you so much as always, buddy.
You got it. Great seeing you. Jesse's in the background. Love you, Jess. Say hi to Steve, and see everybody before the NHL draft.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.